Choosing the right sleeping pad can leave you a little bit confused. There's so many different types, shapes, temperature ratings, it can all get a little confusing. So we've put this little guide together today to hopefully help you decode the differences between different sleeping mats. So let's get stuck in. So when it comes to sleeping mats, there are three main types. So you've got foam mats, which usually closed cell foam. You've then got self-inflating, and then you've got inflatable mats. So we'll give you a Cliff Notes version on each of them just so that you can have a little bit of a breakdown on the differences between the types of mat, and then we can get stuck into the real nitty-gritty around R values and shape and things like that might get a little bit more interesting. So when we're talking about foam mats, there are two kinds. So you've either got Z folding, or you have the more traditional roll mat. So both of these use the same type of foam, so they use a closed cell foam, which means that the foam holds and retains its shape because it's a closed cell. So what it also means is they are super light and basically indestructible. What it also means is they're quite bulky. So this Z folding mat from Expert that we've got here, that is the smallest pack size that it will go down to. So you would tend to use these as an extra layer when winter camping, or to add a little bit of protection underneath an inflatable pad. You can just use these by themselves, but they're not going to be quite as comfortable, and they're certainly not going to be quite as warm because their R value is lower than inflatable and some self-inflating equivalents that we'll get into. Next up, we have self-inflating. Now, self-inflating mats are, again, a bit of a duality when it comes to sleeping mats. So these use an open cell foam. So think like the dish sponge that you've got at home. You can squeeze it underwater, it will suck up all that water and spring back to life, but it won't hold on to that water for too long. The water will start coming out of it. Same kind of thing with these guys. So the idea is that they are self-inflating, so you can open the valve on them and they will start inflating, and then you just top them up to get to your desired level of comfort on the mat. Super simple, super straightforward, and they're usually made from slightly tougher materials than an inflatable pad. So they are going to be a little bit more durable, and if they do suffer a puncture, which is possible with any of the inflatable or self-inflating pads that we've got here, they're not completely bulletproof. You will still have something underneath you for a little bit of comfort, whereas with an inflatable pad, once it pops, unless you've got a repair kit with you, you're going to have a very uncomfortable night. Now, the other type of self-inflating mat that we've got, so this is more of a backpacking style that packs down to a reasonable pack size but is still bulkier than an inflatable equivalent, is then something along the lines of a Nemo Roma. So this one is packed away, or the green mat that we can see behind us here is an Exped Mega Mat Duo. So these are incredibly luxurious, high volume mats. So I mean, high volume is that they hold an awful lot of air and they are very thick. So they're both around 10 centimeters thick. So they are supremely comfortable. Downside of that, because they are self-inflating mats, is the pack size and weight. Realistically, you're not going to want to carry this thing very far from the car, but we'll get more into that later. Last up, you have inflatable pads. Now, inflatable pads come in a huge variety of shapes and sizes, different baffle designs. So you've got vertical baffles, horizontal baffles, and you have some that have more of an egg box style. So some like the Sea to Summit and the Nemo pad that we've got over in the corner of the screen here. All of these rely on very similar technology in the sense that you have to force air into the mats, either with a small electric pump, most of them include a pump sack, or you can top them up by mouth, but we don't tend to recommend that because it introduces moisture and bacteria inside the mat, which is not something we recommend. Always use the pump sack if you can, or a little electric pump. But these guys are really light, they pack down the smallest relative to the warmth that they give off, and they can be nice and thick and very comfortable. Now, just like there are three types of mat that we've talked about already, there are three main factors that you should consider once you've decided which type of mat you're going for. And that is comfort, which is a little bit deeper than it first appears, temperature rating, and the weight and pack size, which will sort of lump together into one thing. Now, we'll start with temperature, because that one is something that can cause a little bit of debate, but should be your first look at as to which mat you go for. And spoiler alert, it might mean that you have to go for more than one mat if you're using the mat across a variety of temperature conditions. Now, Most of these mats will have their temperature expressed in something called R value. And R value refers to the effects of radiant heat loss and how insulated these mats are against that. So R value is essentially a number, and the bigger the number, the better the R value, the better protected you are against radiant heat loss. So that will depend on where and when you're planning on camping. So think of the R value a little bit like season ratings, if that helps you. So you're looking at an R value of 2 into the 2 ranges for something like the Nemo Tensor Elite. That isn't a mat that you would really use in the winter. You'd want to use something with a higher R value. But with that comes a smaller pack size and a much lighter weight with the Tensor Elite. The Tensor Elite is currently the lightest weight sleeping mat that we stock. It comes in at around 250 grams, I think sub 250 grams currently, which is crazy in and of itself. But using that mat in the winter, you would have a very cold night because its R value is significantly lower. That's just not where that mat's designed. Instead of that, you want to be looking for a mat with a higher R value if you plan on using it across 3 seasons into winter. Realistically, if you're looking at doing any winter camping, you want to look at a mat that has an R value that is greater than 4. But the greater the R value, the warmer you will be across a variety of conditions. And that's not the absolute end of it, because you can combine mats. So like I mentioned at the start, you can use things like a roll mat, so a closed cell foam mat like this Ridge Rest Classic from Thermarest here, with another mat, and effectively you combine their R value. So if that's got an R value of 2 and your mat's got an R value of 3, you can combine them together, and it's not quite a perfect science, but effectively you have a mat with an R value of 5, so that will cover you across a wider range of conditions. If you're going to be camping predominantly in winter, you can just focus on a fully winter mat that you can use the rest of the year. Just bear in mind that you might be a little bit toastier because it is much better at preventing that radiant heat loss. But then take your sleeping bag off, unzip it, swap to a quilt, swap to a lighter weight sleeping bag. There are ways around it, but always focus on a temperature rating that is greater than the conditions you're expected to be camping in. And that's partially because these are all based on scientific tests which are in a lab controlled environment. You're not in a lab controlled environment when you're out and about, and they didn't use you for the testing. So there will be some differences in how people respond and react to temperatures. Some people are warm sleepers, some people are cold sleepers, some people will go to bed without having a full meal or a hot drink before bed. Some people will be extremely tired because they've exerted themselves more. All of these can be factors that can change how you respond to temperature. So it is a little bit of a personal choice, but we would always recommend going for something that is a little bit more on the side, erring on the side of caution when it comes to temperature ratings. Now comes the big one, and arguably the most important, and that's comfort. And comfort can be broken down a little bit more than just how comfortable you are when you're sleeping. Because the obvious answer for the most comfortable mat is the thickest, the plushest mat. But that's not always going to be the best option, because whilst something like the Nemo Roma is 10 centimeters thick, and it is essentially a memory foam mattress, similar with the Exped Mega Mat that we've got here that's just been hiding, lurking in the background. This thing is hefty. You're not going to want to carry this in very far. It weighs a lot, it's bulky, it's going to take up an awful lot of room in your pack. So you've got to consider your pack weight and size for where you're going, what you're doing. If you're car camping and you've got the space inside your tent for something like this, absolutely, go for it. You're going to have a really comfortable night's sleep. But if you're backpacking, or you're hiking, or you're fast packing, anything where you're going to be carrying it for any length of time, something like this starts to make less and less sense. And then you have to start looking at some alternatives that are going to be better suited to what you're doing. And mats come in a really wide variety of thicknesses. That Nemo mat really doesn't want to stay upright. We're going to have words afterwards. So these are just 2 examples here. So you've got something that's very near 12 centimeters thick, and then you've got a self-inflating RAB Exosphere here that is around 5 centimeters thick. And I think it's quite clear to see that you're going to have quite a different night on these when it comes to the cushioning that you've got underneath you. It's not to say that you'll have a bad night's sleep on something like the RAB Exosphere, and you're still going to have a good time with it. You've got less to worry about when it comes to punctures and things like that, because you do have slightly more durable, thicker material on mats of this style. But you're potentially going to be a little bit less comfortable. If the ground is particularly lumpy or you're camping in a non-ideal spot, then something that's a little bit thicker will absorb more of those bumps. Thicker mats that are going to be more comfortable, but they're going to be bulkier, but still less bulky than something like the Roma. Or you can choose to go minimal with your setup and have less carry weight when you're going in. So you're carrying less weight, so you'll feel more energized when you get to camp, but then you have a less comfortable mat when you get there, so you might not get as good a night's sleep. So the balance is really up to you. So weight and pack size is something that you really should consider, and that goes for all of your camp system. Something that is right weight for you is probably going to be different for me. So you've probably noticed with some of these mats, you can probably see me over the top of them, only just because of the angle of the camera. But this mat, if I stand a little bit further forward, isn't long enough for me. So that's because I am 6'3", so I'm quite tall. And most sleeping mats, unless they are a female specific mat or a dedicated short mat, will come in at around 180, 183 centimeters. So good for someone up to about 6 foot. And that's fine for the vast majority of the population. But you may also want to go for a longer mat or a wider mat for a little bit more comfort. So something like the Neoloft, and the tent has decided it no longer wants to join us. It's on the floor over there. That's the thing with a mat that light. It is so light, a little gust of wind from me putting another mat down, and it decided to run away. So I've got a Neoloft here, which we think is a really strong, lightweight and right weight choice. So it is heavier than some of the other mats here, but it's really, really plush. So this comes in at 12 centimeters thick. So a really plush, nice, comfortable sleeping surface that still packs down pretty small. It's not going to pack down quite as small as something like the Nemo Tensor Elite that's just run away from us. But this is also much wider and thicker and more comfortable. However, this one still isn't long enough. But we do have the large version, which is taller and more comfortable. And these mats are also both rectangular. And for most people, for the most part, if you're sleeping in a tent, we would probably recommend going for a rectangular mat unless you're particularly trying to cut down on weight or pack size, or if you are sharing a tent with someone else. So this is a little bit dependent on whether you're sharing tents and whether or not you have a tent that's tapered. Because some mats, I put these back, and they don't fall over and decide to run away too, are tapered. So I do need that Nemo. So the Nemo, you can probably see, tapers. So you can see the Neoloft behind all around it. So the Nemo is much more efficient when it comes to weight and pack size, but you have a much smaller sleeping surface. And there is a time and a place for this if you're trying to save weight and cut down and have the lightest, smallest pack size, which is totally valid. Something that is tapered is going to be a better bet for you. And also if you are in a bivvy or in a one-man, sort of very slimline one-man tent, then a tapered mat is probably going to be a better bet to give you something that fits inside the environment that you're using it. However, I fall off these mats quite often because, well, I'm a side sleeper, so that's a different part of the story. But there's not a lot of space towards the end of the mat. I've got quite big feet. I don't have a lot of space at the end of these mats. So I choose to go for a rectangular mat and take the weight penalty and pack size penalty to get something that is more comfortable for me. And that's really at the heart of the comfortable debate here. It's what you're comfortable being in a sleeping mat. You know, if you're comfortable with the mat and you want to use it in its tapered form, you're in an alpine situation, you're bivvying, you're in a really light one-man tent that's really tapered, really narrow. You want a little bit more space inside the tent to maybe put your pack inside with you, something like that, then a tapered mat wins. However, I would always go for, if you can fit it, a rectangular mat, just because you get a little bit more comfort, and if you are a side sleeper, you've got a little bit more space. That's also where something like the Thermarest, Neoloft, the other mats are available in this sort of style as well. By the way, this is just the example we're using in this video. They do wide versions. So we've got a regular RAB Stratosphere there, and this is that much wider. I personally find this mat considerably more comfortable just because it is wider. I can side sleep on it, I can move around a little bit more, and it's just very comfortable. However, in certain situations that just doesn't work, so you wouldn't want to use this in a bivvy without double checking the fit first. You're probably going to have a little bit less space, a little bit less comfort with that in a bivvy situation because it's just not going to fit as well. And that's the whole debate. You've got to figure out what's right for you. The temperature ratings, the weight, the pack size, they should all narrow down, and you should end up with a decision of to which sleeping mat that you want to go for. But what if you still can't decide? What do you do then? Well, fortunately, I'm in our Hereford Service Centre today, and all of these mats, give or take, were in stock upstairs, in our upstairs showroom, and we have the opportunity to give you to test and try these mats in store. So you can lie on them, you can see them getting inflated, you can see the relative pack sizes. We can pack out a rucksack for you here as well. So if you do need a little bit of further help and assistance when it comes to picking and choosing a sleeping mat of any of these types, come and see us. Tell us what tent you've got, and we'll be able to narrow it down for you and give you the right answer for which sleeping mat is right for you. It's the whole point. That's why we have a shop, it's so you can come and visit us and you can try these things out. And we love to see you. We want to talk about kit. We're all gear nerds here, so if we can talk about sleeping mats to you to get you the right one for your adventures, we're going to do it. Hopefully that helps narrow down sleeping mats for you a little bit. With such a wide variety of mats, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but just focus on those three key pillars. Temperature rating, or R value, your comfort, and weight and pack size. And together with that triangle, you should be able to figure out where your priorities lie, and that should point you in the right direction of which mat to go for.